Our next speakers, Jon Evenson and Aaron Vanney, and they are with Rolf Jensen. They'll speak to safety and security services, design, code consulting, and developing fire and life safety strategies on international projects. Gentlemen.
Well, good morning. Truly an amazing feat. Goes for all the presentations we've heard yesterday and this morning. Just some remarkable projects going on and progressive thinking. The future of buildings are changing. And if all of you could join me and just take a step back, don't mean to be a downer, but we need to rethink, okay, well, what are the real goals and how are we going to build these amazing buildings, but how are we going to do it in a safe manner? How are we going to do it to meet regulatory requirements, but then how are we also going to identify what else needs to be provided so that we can protect our families and our investments. So as we take a step back, you always want to identify the goals, and sometimes you get into a building code or a regulation and you're trying to find what the specific requirements are, but on a building like Burj Dubai, you really need to take a step back and identify what is the overall goal of the project. And first is you need to protect your building occupants. You need to make sure it's a safe environment to live in, safe environment to work in. And then also, if there is an event, you're going to have your first responders come to site, and you need to protect them as well so they have the confidence to enter the building and to pursue any actions that need to be taken. And last but not least is you need to protect your investment, you need to protect your property, and you need to make sure that business continues. We do understand that there's always the possibility that the systems we've installed will not prevent everything from occurring. So the next step is going one step further into the operations, and if there is an event, trying to mitigate that event to make sure that you have the most efficient response possible and that you can have an enhanced coordination with the authorities so that when they come on site, they're updated, they're up to speed, and they have all the information they need to base their operations. And also, we need to make sure that lines of communication are open, but we also need to make sure that they're directed in the right manner, because we don't want two people trying to fight the same effort and trying to push and pull. It just reduces the efficiency of your response. So, like we'll find in most high-rise buildings, typical building codes would classify a high-rise building as anything over 8 to 10 stories. Well, what do you do at 160? So we're going to first go over some of the basic requirements. Throughout the last couple of decades, automatic sprinkler systems have been required in virtually every high-rise building. And that is to control the fire, make sure that the fire or smoke is not generated in a manner that the building systems cannot tolerate, and also by identifying zones within your building so that if a fire does overcome a sprinkler system, that it can be contained to a single floor so that the zone of incident can be identified and can be manageable. Also, if there is an event in your building, how do you tell somebody on the 160th floor? How do you tell the workers, the residents, that there is an incident from the fire command center or from the security desk? So you're going to want a way to notify and, well, first off, to detect an event. And we've gone through the process of identifying ways to notify occupants by floor, through designated areas of the building, stairwells, areas of refuge, so that the information gathering can be enhanced and you can create a more efficient response. And then also, if there is an event that requires occupant relocation or building evacuation, you need to make sure that you can protect those occupants as they proceed to a safe area of the building. And that's by protecting your stair enclosures, protecting critical service areas in the building, and also protecting the first responders so that they can approach the fire and they can get to their staging area without having to worry of the threat spreading before they can get there. So now we'll move on to the meat of the presentation. Okay, we have the requirements. We know what we need to do for a 10-story building. What do you do at 160? There are a number of enhancements that we have recommended, and it is truly amazing on how proactive EMAR and SOM have been at prioritizing these enhancements and implementing them in an efficient way. As Adrian mentioned in the morning presentation, one of the enhancements is areas of refuge. Areas of refuge is a very key enhancement for buildings of this size. What they do is they give us flexibility in how we can respond to an event and how we can relocate occupants. We've identified 4 areas throughout the building, and they are sized so we can accommodate 3 floors. Now, ideally, you'd like to make sure you can relocate all the occupants in a building. However, we've taken an approach to evacuate occupants in a staged evacuation. We're going to identify the fire zone, we're going to identify the adjacent zones that may be affected, and that is the floor of a fire, 1 floor above, 1 floor below. And those occupants would be notified of an event so that they can relocate down to the nearest area of refuge and they can wait further instruction. The rest of the occupants throughout the building will be notified that there is an event. However, at that time, it may not have proceeded to the point where we'd go through a full building evacuation. And also what it does is the areas of refuge connect the egress stairs so that as soon as you enter one of those exit enclosures, you're protected. You have a fire-rated barrier surrounding you as well as mechanical systems to prevent smoke from coming in and compromising that stair shaft. And it allows you to transfer from one stair to the next. So for instance, if one stair zone is compromised, you're able to direct occupants to another stair without leaving that protected space. As we mentioned, we're going to have a notification system, but we've gone to the step further and enhancing that. And if you enter the building, you'd probably never even know it was there. This is the home automation system, which it'll be installed in various areas of the building, including areas of refuge, and including every dwelling unit, hotel and residential. And that will be an LCD screen that will provide occupants with just daily information. It'll be an interface for them to communicate with different building staff. And then in the event of emergency, we're able to override that and take control of it and provide instructions whether or not they should stay in their unit, whether or not they should proceed to the stairs, and gives them just more information so that they can validate any concerns that they've had of an alarm. And it will also provide us with real-time instructions so that you can send the customized message instead of just a pre-recorded voice communication. Moving on, a very hot topic in fire and life safety today is the elevator-assisted evacuation. And you'll hear more about that tomorrow in the fire and life safety session, one or two, I believe it's 1. But elevator-assisted evacuation is something that has been frowned upon in the past, and it's just unsure whether or not it's a protected system that can provide reliable service for evacuating occupants. We haven't taken any concession for that, but we've added it. So all the stair enclosures are designed as you typically find in a high-rise building to evacuate occupants, but this is going to be used to provide a protected means to evacuate occupants. Includes water-resistant equipment, includes raised door thresholds at the elevator shafts so that we limit the amount of water coming into the shafts. And it also includes video monitoring capabilities so that before they begin operations, the first responders or building staff can send each cab up and down each hoistway to inspect it to make sure that it's not compromised. The elevator-assisted evacuation is a very important enhancement because when you're looking at a building that's over 160 stories, you start thinking, okay, well, now is our evacuation time starting to exceed the time we've built into our critical systems? And the elevator-assisted evacuation, we've done a couple of studies on it, and we have found that the scheme that was chosen was in an ideal situation. You know, there's a number of different factors that come into a full building evacuation. But comparing just an ideal scenario of evacuating through stairs versus evacuating through an elevator, you're able to reduce your total building evacuation time by almost 50%, which is pretty amazing when you're talking hours. And then the last enhancement I'd like to go over is we've also integrated in a floor smoke control system. So if the floor goes into alarm, the corridor is exhausted, to allow the occupants to give them a little extra time so that they can get into the corridor and into the protected stairway. And the last enhancement John will discuss, it is regarding the operations side of thing, which is another very proactive approach that EMAR has taken.
Thank you. One of the things that we have to look at from our standpoint is how do we manage the building once it's open? A lot of the talk the last few days and tomorrow is about sustainability, about design and architecture. What our focus is once that building is operational, how do we manage the worst case scenario? What we've done is we've looked at it, and EMAR has been so proactive in thinking like this that they got us involved in developing a comprehensive crisis management plan starting in 2005. So we started way back in 2005, starting to think about all the different scenarios that we might have to face with a building of this size and nature. First, I think the key issue that I face coming from a fire protection company is there's a misconception that the only crisis that's out there is fire. Realistically, in a situation in a building like this, in an environment like this, my biggest concern is not a fire because of the structure and the systems that are in place. It's more of a situation in the middle of July when the generators fail and the electrical system fail. And now I have a full building of occupied floors, and no way I now have to get them out. And that's a bigger concern to me. What some of the challenges we face? We face, the pure size of the building. It's 160 floors. It's a large building, and it's spread out over a lot of area. The iconic nature of the building. Obviously, it's going to be the world's tallest building. It also becomes a target to somebody who wants to do something negative towards Dubai, towards the UAE, or towards a U.S.-friendly ally. So we have to build that into our responses. And also the number and types of occupants. This building is going to have a hotel, which is an Armani hotel, which brings its own classification of, VIPs. We have residential and business occupants. We have very important guests. We might have former heads of state that come here. And we also have visitors. We might have a wide range of visitors from a toddler at 2 years old to somebody that's 85 years old. And we have to build all this into our response procedures. And that's why EMAR got us involved very early on in 2005. Some of the other issues we have, adjacent buildings. As it was said this morning, it's in downtown Burj Dubai. Downtown Burj Dubai has over 50 high-rise buildings, including the Dubai Mall, which is connected to the tower. Now, the Dubai Mall is going to be what's considered the world's largest mall. It also has an occupant load that is ridiculous. So our concern is, how do we manage that? If something happens at the mall, we have to be able to understand how to respond to that, and vice versa. And also Business Bay. Business Bay, it adjoins to downtown Burj Dubai, and there are parcels that are not developed by EMAR that we have to coordinate our responses with. Language barriers. Everybody in this room can tell me the same thing. There are going to be language barriers. The concern we have is, how do we get our message out there concisely and uniformly, but in a way that somebody can understand what they're supposed to do? And obviously media coverage. I think that speaks for itself. If something happens at the building, it's going to be international news. I apologize. How do we address these challenges? I think what we set out to do is we wanted to create a structured response management team by creating a crisis command team that's responsible for the overall management of a crisis. And that's going to be discussed in a little bit. And then we also identified zone response teams. Our concern was if we have a situation in a portion of the building, we don't want to alarm every single area in the building. We want to identify the area, notify, respond, and go from there. Scale of response strategies. What we did was we looked at each event, and we said we need to have different levels that we can scale our response up or back depending on the need and the crisis. Comprehensive number of response procedures. We've identified over 45 different responses. Not everyone's going to happen, but we have to identify, we have to have those pieces in place just in case it does. I'd rather have it in place and train somebody to it than not have it in place and have something happen. And integration with local authorities. This is our suggested crisis command team. It's made up of 6 key members. We also have it tied into EMAR's corporate management team and their corporate crisis management team. We also have to make sure that we have connections with the local authorities. But what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to have a situation where there was several people that would talk to the civil defense. So what we've identified is a single position that's responsible for managing that process. Each one of these different positions has a responsibility in the response to manage their area of expertise. Also, we identified zone response teams. As I talked about, we have to have zone response teams that are organized. We want to make sure they're identified to be able to help out in their zones. We wanted to identify the building services people that are there because they know the building. They know what's going on their floors. Instead of trying to send a group of people to a floor that they don't know, we'd rather use the people that are understanding what the operations are. The other thing we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure it was a clean structure because we wanted to make sure the information flow during a crisis was a uniform flow from the crisis command team to the people that need the information and back. The crisis levels, we wanted to create a scalable response level. Anywhere from a crisis level 1, which is a situation. An example would be somebody has a heart attack. It doesn't affect the 160 other floors, but it affects that one person. As opposed to a level 4 emergency, where it could be multiple building zones are in a fire situation. And it requires a different response. Well, we've also done, this is just a brief list of the response procedures that we've developed. What we did is we broke them down into 4 different categories. We looked at building system related situations. We looked at human related, terrorism related, and weather related. What we did is we also added a tsunami response procedure. It's probably not going to happen in Dubai, but you never know. We wanted to make sure we had it in place just in case something happened. And each of these levels has 4 different response levels tied into the overall procedure. One of the key questions was talking about evacuation. Not every procedure requires an immediate evacuation. It might need a shelter-in-place response, is the initial response. All we're trying to do with these documents in our crisis response plan is to be able to provide that initial response until the civil defense or other local authorities arrive. Once they arrive, we become a subset to their team, and that's what we're trying to do. Local authority integration. We want to make sure that the civil defense and police department know about the building. A building of this nature, they need to know every single piece of it. We've been involved with meeting with them since 2005. The initial talk we had was in, I believe, January 2006, and we want to get them involved as early as possible. Right now they have our procedures. They're going through them with a fine-tooth comb to find out what pieces don't fit. We want to make sure that we actually have that installed and ready to go, so now we can start the training process. And then I think one of the big things that gets forgotten in crisis response plans, but we're trying to identify for this building and this site, is mutual aid support. We might not be able to have all the resources and be able to have all the manpower and materials to be able to manage a large-scale response. If you talk about evacuating 12,000 people off the site, we're going to need something of transportation. We might need more materials. We might need operational support from the mall or from one of the other parcels. And we might need consumable support. If it's a hot day in the middle of July, we might need food and water. So what we're doing is we're looking at that early to be able to identify those key contacts and make arrangements with those providers early. And I think the biggest key for us is EMAR's been a very proactive approach. They've had a very proactive approach when it comes to crisis management. We started this project and we did the tower. Once we started doing the tower, they realized after we had several discussions that they need to incorporate this into downtown Burj Dubai. Since then, we've actually started working with them on doing crisis response plans for every single one of the parcels, as well as a site-wide crisis management plan. Because our concern is, from a site-wide area level, there are infrastructure issues that we have to deal with, such as traffic, such as electrical service, such as gas service. And we need to make sure that we have a global response and then individual parcel responses that coordinate with the overall plans. So realistically, for this kind of a plan to succeed, we need a coordination between everybody. It's the crisis command team, that's the Burj Dubai Management, the local authorities, the occupants. The occupants have to know what they should or should not do. Our concern is if we tell them to do something, we need to make sure it's the right information. You know, the adjacent structures. If something happens at the tower, we need to make sure that the mall knows, that the Park Hotel knows, all those areas know. Integration with building enhancements. We need to utilize the building enhancements, such as area refuge floors, such as the fire alarm systems, the automatic sprinkler systems, and utilize those pieces as the enhancements to assist with our response procedures. And realistically, it's utilizing those enhancements during an emergency situation. And that's it. Thank you.